Good afternoon, dear students of Geography Department, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar Open University and resource persons and the viewers. I welcome you all for this teleconference on the topic of fluvial cycle of erosion. So, today we are having two eminent resource persons with us to discuss about this topic. So, first Professor Vijaya Bhyole ma'am, good afternoon madam. So, ma'am, she is an emeritus retired professor of geography department from the Osmania University. She has also contributed as a writer and the editor in preparing the course material of geography in the Dr. B.R. Ambedkar Open University. And she has also produced 15 research scholars from the university, and she has also have the vast teaching experience, that is 30 years of teaching experience in various level like academic as well as the competitive level. So next, another eminent personal resource person is Professor B. Nagesh sir. Good afternoon sir. And sir is a professor of the geography department from the Osmania University. Sir is also having the n number of research publication which have been published in various national and international publication. Sir has also contributed as a writer and the moderator as well as the editor while preparing the geography notes or course material for the Ambedkar Open University. And sir has served in the university in various academic and administrative position. Presently, sir is serving as the director of academic audit cell. With this brief introduction of the resource person, once again I welcome you all for this teleconference for the concept of fluvial cycle of erosion. Today we are going to discuss about the fluvial cycle of erosion, which is a core concept of the geomorphology and which has been included in the first year's geography syllabus. Today we are going to discuss about this. This fluvial cycle of erosion was proposed by the William Morris Davis, who was an American geomorphologist. So in his work, his work entitled as a geographical cycle of erosion, this particular concept was proposed in his work like a complete cycle of river life. That means how the river has started its life and how it has been ended. The entire concept of the river life has been explained in this concept. So popularly, this cycle of erosion, fluvial cycle of erosion, is known as the landform development. That means different stages of the landform development will being explained in this particular concept. That is the reason why popularly it is called as a landform development, and it provides a genetic classification as well as the systematic description of the landforms on the earth surface. Why we are saying it is a genetic classification? Because genetic, it is a word, something which is related with the origin. That means origin of the landform we are going to discuss, as well as the systematic description of the landforms, how they have been placed on the earth surface. The both things we are going to discuss in this particular fluvial cycle of erosion concept. So he majorly, W.M. Davis has emphasized the two words like recognizable landscape and also the stages of evolution. So in the recognizable landscape, so we can identify the landform, we can find out, we can recognize, which is something related with the space, and the stages of evolution is nothing but it is related with the time. So at most in the geography we are related with the space and time. That means in the fluvial cycle of erosion, how the landforms have been development with respect to the space and time have been explained in this particular fluvial cycle of erosion. So he has emphasized another time that sequential development of the landforms. That means how the landscape will be developed in the sequence order with respect to the time. So for this matter, he has taken that landscape is the function of the three things, that is structure, process and time. So before going into the topic, ma'am, I would like to ask a question that, so this is the entire topic is related with the cycle of erosion. So before going to the topic, I want to know that the role of the river or the work of the river in fluvial cycle of erosion. Can you explain me this?
Thank you, Dr. Pratigna. As you have rightly said, that before going to the concept of cycle of erosion, we should try to understand the surface of the earth and how the landforms that develops on the surface of the earth. So one thing about the surface of the earth is that it's very dynamic in nature. So when we are telling the concept of dynamism of the earth's surface, it means that it is in a constant stage of changing. Now the question comes is that why the earth's surface is dynamic in nature. So here there are two important factors which are acting on the earth's surface. These two factors are, one is the internal factor, which is called as endogenetic factor, which has an origin inside the earth's surface. And this internal factor is responsible for the upliftment of the landform. And the second important factor is the external factor, which in geomorphic terminology is called as endogenetic factor, which act externally on the earth's surface. So one of the major factor is the climatic factor. Other than climatic factor, you have certain natural agencies which also acts on the earth's surface, and these natural agencies are called as geomorphic agents. So these geomorphic agents are river or stream or glaciers or wind or underground water or sea waves, etc. So these factors act on the earth's surface, and externally they are responsible for reducing the height of the landforms. So among these geomorphic factors or the agents, river is one of the important factor. River, or we can call it as a stream, or we can also call it as a running water. So this concept of fluvial cycle of erosion is related to the work of river. So before going to the concept of cycle of erosion, now let us try to understand what is the nature of landscape that develops, or the type of landforms which are evolved by the river. So when you take the river, the origin of the river is in the mountainous areas, and that area is called as the source of the river, right? And the river from the source, it ultimately ends into the sea or the ocean, which is called as the mouth of the river. So the profile or the cross section of the river from the mountainous stage up to the mouth of the river where it meets the ocean, that profile is called as the long profile of the river. So when we are talking about the role of river or the landforms which are developed by the river, so ultimately we are trying to know what type of landscape changes are taking place by the river. So when we are talking about the work of river, the work of the river is undertaken by three important factors or processes. So the first process is the erosional process, the second important process is the transportation process, and the third important process is the depositional process. So when you come to the first process, that is the erosion, undertaken by the river is by two important processes. One is called as valley deepening, or in other words we can call it as the vertical erosion, due to which the valley will get more and more deepened, or there will be deepening of the valley. And the second important type of erosion undertaken by the river is the lateral erosion, where the river attacks the side of the valley. So due to this second process, that is lateral erosion, the valley will get expanded laterally, and because of that the bed of the river or the valley becomes more flat. So the first process which is undertaken by the river is the erosion. And erosion is by different processes, say for example by hydraulic action, by iteration, by aberration, by corrosion, etc. So these are all the processes by which the erosion is undertaken by the river. The second important thing is the transportation. The river is a mobile agent, that is it moves from one area to another area. So when it is undergoing the transportation work, it carries certain material along with it, and the river moves from one area to another area because of the slope of the river, or in other words, just now I discussed that it is called as the long profile of the river. Now the eroded material, or the material which is carried by the river, that is the transportation work, includes the sediments or the eroded material, which includes rock fragments, pebbles, sand, etc., which act as a cutting tool or which act as a erosive tool. And the third important process which is undertaken by the river is the deposition. So usually river does deposition when the volume of the water is less, and the sediment carried by the river during the transportation is called as the load of the river. So when the load of the river is more and the slope of the river is less, then naturally the river start depositing it. So these are the three natural processes by which the river undertakes or creates different types of landforms on the earth surface. Now let us come back here. That is, just now we have said that the origin of the river is called as the source of the river. Now the question comes is that where is this source of river? The source of the river will be in the mountainous areas. So in mountainous areas, the slope of the river is more, or the gradient of the river channel is more, the velocity of the velocity and the volume of the water is more. So naturally the river will be actively engaged in undertaking erosion. So in this particular process, in the mountainous areas, the river will carve out, or a large number of landforms are evolved in the mountainous stage or the upper course of the river, and these landforms are V-shaped valleys, or V-shaped valleys are formed due to the valley deepening or process of vertical erosion. Then these V-shaped valleys are also called as gorges or canyons. Now another important feature which has been associated in the mountainous stage, or which is an erosional feature of the river, is the waterfalls. So waterfalls will occur when there is a break in the long profile of the river, when the water will descend from one elevation to another elevation. And the smaller type of waterfalls are called as rapids. So waterfalls and rapids is another important landform which has been developed by the river. Then other than these two landforms, in the mountainous stage, there will be development of what is called as the interlocking spurs also. So these are some of the major erosional features which are associated in the upper course of the river. Now the river leaves the mountainous area and now it descends, or it debouches into the plain area. So when it comes, it enters the plain area, the erosive capacity of the work will be less and there will be more of the deposition. So immediately when the river enters the plain area and leaves the mountain, it is responsible for the formation of erosional features. So first of the depositional features, which includes alluvial fans, which are located at the base of the mountains. Now the deposits of these alluvial fans, they grow vertically into the form of alluvial cones. So alluvial cones and alluvial forms, they are formed as the base of the mountain, which is also called as the Piedmont area of the mountain. So afterwards, in the journey of the river, or when the river is traversing through the plain area, number of other features are also formed. Say for example, floodplains are there. It is one of the depositional feature. Then you have natural levees. Then you have meandering of the river. Then oxbow lakes. Now these are the depositional feature which are formed in the plain area. Then ultimately, when the river is nearing to the mouth of the river, or when it is nearer or entering near the sea or the ocean, you find another very major depositional landforms formed by the river, like deltas. Now these are the erosional and depositional landforms which are formed by the river.
Thank you, ma'am, for elaboratively discussion of the various processes which have been included in the fluvial landforms, as well as the various landforms which have been evolved during this process, like erosional and the transportational and depositional landforms. Thank you so much. Now question is to Nagesh sir, Professor Nagesh sir. So as the madam has said that the various landforms will develop at the time of the erosional features. So what do you mean by gorges, and how do the rapid form, sir? Please can you explain, sir?
So as madam has explained about the youth stage of the river formation, gorges and rapids are part of this youth stage, And when we specifically speak of the gorges, these are the deep narrow valleys which are formed by the erosive action of the rivers over geological time scale. So what do we mean by geological time scale? Means over a period of time, because it is not a 1 or 2 days action of a river, but it is about over a longer period of time, which based on the erosive activity of the river, these gorges are formed. And these gorges, they are more narrow and deeper and steeper when compared to the canyons. So when we give the examples of the gorges, we have the famous Grand Canyon of USA, formed by the Colorado River, and in India and Nepal we find the Kali and Gandak gorge area on the river Kali, and also the Yangtze Kiang River, that is the famous Three Gorges Dam, which is built in China. So the formation of these gorges is mainly due to the rapid action of the rivers, which cut on the steep valleys along its way and making into a much deeper gorges. And when we talk about the rapids, as we see on the screen, these are the ones where we find due to the sudden change in the topography, either due to the increase in the the topography or the steepness of the topography, where we find sudden decrease in topography due to the various actions of geological activity, or the change in the course of the river, or the narrowness of the river, or we can say that due to the the erosive action or the resistive type of rock which we find in the the flow of the water. So as we see on the screen, we find that the rapids which are there, where we can see clearly that the top rock which is there, it is more resistant type of rock, usually which is belongs to the either granitic or quartz type of rock, and the lower one what we see is more of a sedimentary type of rock, which is soft type of rock, which erodes faster than the hard type of rock. So here the rapids, they due to the sudden change in the topography, they start accumulate the water and they start falling at a much steeper slope than the normal phase that we have.
So thank you so much, sir, for the detailed explanation of the gorges and the formation of the rapids. There is a small announcement for the students. Actually, duration of this session is 30 minutes, which has been started at 2 o'clock, and you can ask the questions after 30 minutes related to fluvial cycle of this particular topic. And I am reading the contact number. Please note it down. The contact number to get the questions is 040-2368-0456. Let me repeat the contact number once again, 040-2368-0456. I request the students to ask the question related to fluvial cycle of erosion. Thank you. So now sir has explained the gorges, water gorges, and the formation of the rapids. Ma'am, the next question is to you that, so can you give the conceptual background of the cycle of erosion, ma'am? Because what is the actual concept? Because you have explained the various processes like erosional process, transportational activities, depositional activity, and the landforms which are associated with that. So what is actual concept of the fluvial cycle of erosion? Please can you give me, ma'am?
Okay, there is a basic difference between the landforms which are being evolved as fluvial landforms, as well as the landforms that are developed during the cycle of erosion. Now let us come back to this particular term of this topic, fluvial. The term fluvial is related to the work of river. The fluvial cycle of erosion will be seen on the earth's surface, where the rainfall is more, or in other words you can call it as a humid climate. Where the rainfall is more. Say for example, in India we have the fluvial landforms that are developed in different parts of the country. Now let us come back to the concept of cycle of erosion. Now if you take the what is called the landscape, the landscapes is changing constantly. Just now I said that it is changing constantly. So the constant change is brought out by the action of river. Say for example, the erosional action of the river or the depositional action of the river. So the concept of cycle of erosion is given by W.M. Davis. So according to W.M. Davis, there is a cyclic evolution of the landforms, or in other words we can say that there is a progressive change in the evolution of the landforms. So according to Davis, the landscape which is being developed by the action of the river can be classified into 3 different stages. One is the youthful stage, the second one is the maturity stage, and the third one is the old stage. So these are the 3 important stages during which the river will progress during its course or during its journey. Now let us come back to the first stage, that is the youthful stage. In the youthful stage, the river is very, very active. So when we say that river is very active, that means it is undertaking the work of erosion. And basically the type of erosion which the river is undertaking is mostly related to the vertical erosion or valley deepening. Say river is undertaking or it is becoming more active because of one basic factor, that is the slope is more. So during the first stage of the river, the slope or the gradient of the river is more, or the channel gradient is more. So because the channel gradient is more, and secondly the volume of water which is being carried by the river, so it can actively engage in undertaking the erosive work. So these are the 2 factors why it becomes active or undertake the erosion. So in the process it creates a large number of features, and most of these features or all the features are mostly the erosional features. Say for example, already we have seen in the fluvial landforms the features which are associated in the mountainous areas. Say for example, first is the V-shaped valleys. One of the major feature which is associated in the youthful stage of the river is the V-shaped valleys, which are called as gorges or which are called as canyons also. See, there is a slight difference between the term gorge and the canyon. It depends on the width of the valley and the side of the valley, etc. So the major landforms which are associated in the youthful stage of the river is the V-shaped valleys or gorges or canyon. And after that you have what is called as interlocking spurs. So interlocking spurs are because of the variation in the relief in the mountainous areas, and the river flows in a zigzag way, and the visibility of the river will be less because of the interlocking nature of the spurs or the projected part of the spurs. Then another thing is the waterfalls and rapids. So waterfalls and rapids are caused due to the differential erosion. That is, when there are the presence of hard rocks and soft rocks in the along the profile of the river, the soft rock will get eroded faster than the hard rock, and therefore you have the presence of waterfalls and rapids. The small type of waterfalls, they are called as rapids. Now you come to the second stage of the fluvial cycle of erosion, which is called as maturity stage. So the major work which has been undertaken by the river is erosion, but the erosion is of a different nature. It is not the deepening of the valley, but it is the widening of the valley which has been caused by the lateral erosion. So due to that, the valley profile changes. So instead of the V-shaped valley, you have the presence of the broad valleys, or in other words, it is the U-shaped valleys. Then another important thing is that along with the erosion, the river also undertakes some type of deposition. And due to deposition, number of features are formed in the maturity stage of the river, such as floodplains, then meandering of the river, then you have oxbow lakes. So these are the features which are developed during the second stage of the river, or in other words, you can call it as the maturity stage of the river. So one very important aspect of the maturity stage of the river is that there are two important processes which operate simultaneously in the maturity stage. That is, the river is undertaking erosion and simultaneously deposition also. So when the river undertakes both erosion and deposition simultaneously, then that process, or that the profile that develops, or the landscape that develops during the maturity stage of the river is called as profile of equilibrium. That is, the landscape more or less come to the equal formation of the relief, because it is undertaking erosion as well as deposition simultaneously. And such rivers which are involved in undertaking both erosion and deposition simultaneously, they are called as the graded river. So if you compare the relief which is formed during the first stage, that is the youthful stage, and the maturity stage, so if you take the relief that develops in the maturity stage of the river is not that much as compared to the youthful stage. Now you come to the old stage of the river. Now in the old stage of the river, the channel gradient, or in other words you can call it as the slope of the river, it becomes more or less flat. So and another very important aspect in the old stage is that the volume of the river is also, volume of water carried by the river is also less. So under these two important factors, the river will be mostly undertaking deposition, or you can say only deposition will take place. So in that case you have the formation of the flood plates in the old stage also. And here one important aspect is that two important features will be formed during the old stage, that is most of the landscape, because the cycle of erosion starts with an uplifted landforms, and in the end what is happening to the uplifted landform in the old stage is that there is a sequential reduction in the height of the landforms. So when it comes to the old stage, most of the area is converted into a featureless plain, or more or less a flat plain, or in other words, most of the landscape is nearing to the sea level, right? And there is a flat plain which develops during the old stage of cycle of erosion, which is called as peneplains. And here and there you can see the remains of earlier watershed, or the water divides, in the form of isolated hills which are called as monadnocks. So these are the sequential changes in the landscape which are taking place during the fluvial cycle of erosion. To sum up, we can say that there is an orderly change, or the sequential change in the landforms as you progress from the youthful stage to the to the maturity stage to the old stage. And one basic thing which emerges from the concept of cycle of erosion is that in the youthful stage the river is more active in undertaking erosion, and when it comes to the maturity stage, it is erosion and deposition simultaneously. But when it comes to the old stage, it is mostly a depositional work. And these are the evolutionary changes that are taking place in the landscape during the fluvial cycle of erosion.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for giving elaborative discussion on the different conceptual background of the fluvial cycle of erosion, as well as the youthful stage, which is vertical erosion, which is active in youthful stage, and the valley deepening, which is valley widening, which is actively role in deposition. So my further question is that, where do we India the youthful stage of the fluvial cycle of erosion is seen, ma'am?
Okay. So the basic concept which is involved in the cycle of erosion is related to the geological history of the landscape. So when we are talking about the geological history in the fluvial landscape, during the long geological history of the landscape, it is passing from youthful stage to maturity stage to old stage. So here one important assumption of the fluvial cycle of erosion, or you can call it as the Davisian cycle of erosion, is that a particular part of the earth surface is been rapidly uplifted, which is called as the concept of standstill, in the sense that there is no further upliftment in the area. So when we are talking about the what is called as the area where you can see the youthful landscape in India, we have to go back to the geological history of India. If you take the physiographic divisions of India, from the geological point of view, we can divide India into two parts. That is the northern part of India, which is Himalayas, which is young in geological history. The Himalayas have developed in the tertiary period, and in the southern section of India, that in physiographic terminology you call it as peninsular India, and peninsular India is one of the oldest landmass of the earth surface. So usually the youthful stage of the river is seen in the mountainous areas, and in mountainous areas which are usually very young. So if you take Himalayas, they are the young fold mountains on the earth surface. So if you take the youthful stage of the river, you have in India we can see this type of landscape in Himalayas. Say for example, in Himalayas you have numerous what is called as gorges which have been formed by the rivers like Satluj River or Indus River, which are one of the deepest gorges or the V-shaped valleys on the earth. So ultimately we can say that the youthful stage of the river is mostly seen in Himalayan region or which are young fold mountains.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Sir, my next question to sir. Sir, madam has said that the youthful stage of the fluvial cycle of erosion is seen in Himalayas region or the mountain region or the northern India. So in peninsular India, what stage of fluvial cycle of erosion is seen, sir?
Yeah, as madam has apprised that the youthful stage in Himalayas, and when it comes to the peninsular India, and it is geologically the oldest region we can say, and we find that over a period of time there has been lot of weathering, or we can say wear and tear of this region. And this region basically has, the rivers that flow, they are basically of mature stage, because due to the weathering process and the river the rivers which originate from the Western Ghats, they have been found since ancient times, and through this geological time scale they have been formed of the, as we call, the meandering of the rivers, the oxbow lakes, natural levees, peneplain, etc. So this region is basically of the mature stage where we find the deposition, erosion as well as the depositional features. And if you take the examples of the peninsular rivers right from Mahanadi to Godavari, Krishna and Kaveri, they have their origins in the Western Ghats, but they flow towards the eastern side, and while flowing they form the mature stage, and they, along with the erosion, they give the depositional feature as well, basically the meandering of the rivers, oxbow lakes, natural levees, and what we call as the peneplain.
So thank you, sir. As you said that the peninsular India is associated with the mature stage of fluvial cycle of erosion. So can you give me the example, or can you explain what are the landforms which have been evolved during the mature stage of fluvial cycle of erosion, sir?
Yeah, definitely. As we find the in youthful stage the different types of formations, erosive activity formation, it's typically the mature stage also has erosion as well as the what we call as the depositional features. So as I said earlier, the first phase of mature stage of the river fluvial cycle is that it is the meandering. So when the river enters into the plain region, they start depositing the sediments on the banks of the rivers, and when they start depositing the sediments on the banks of the rivers, they start taking the meandering shape as we see in the picture. So over a longer period of time, because they have entered into the plains, they start depositing on the inner margins of the these meanders, and over a period of time, slowly the meandering and the deposition of the sediments, what they do is they close the flow of due to the deposition of the sediments, they close the flow of the river water, and thereby creating the oxbow lakes, which as we can see in the picture on the slide, where we see that the rivers, their meanders, they are being cut off, and we find the deposition of sediments and the formation of the oxbow lake. Similarly, due to the deposition of these features over a longer period of time and the gradation of the land, and where the flat lands have become, and the deposition of these features, they create a natural levees in the mature stage, and these natural levees, they form they are due to the deposition by the river flow sediments that are being brought by the rivers. So in a way, we can say that the deposition features which we see right from the oxbow, the meandering to the oxbow lake and the natural levees, they actually depend upon the flow of the river and the carrying capacity of the sediment of the river.
So thank you so much, sir, for the detailed explanation of the various landforms which have been formed during the mature stage of the fluvial cycle of erosion. So my next question is to ma'am that, so ma'am, we have discussed till now various stages like youthful stage, mature stage, and the old stage. So can you tell me, so how much time it will take to complete the cycle of erosion?
Yeah, it's a very good question. The question is related to the amount of time that is being taken to complete the cycle of erosion. That is what you mean. Okay. Now, there is no fixed time for the completion of the cycle of erosion in terms of geological history. The time period is not fixed. Now, the question comes is that why the time period is not fixed. So, Davis has given the concept of trio. That is, the landscape which has been evolved over a period of time is an outcome of three important processes. One is the structure, second is the process, and the third one is the stage. And the stage is related to the time factor. Suppose now the question comes is that how much time it takes to complete one cycle of erosion. So if you take the geologic of a particular area or the geological structure of an area. So geological structure of the area means the hardness and softness of the rock, or you can say the permeability of the rock, the what is called porosity of the rocks, etc. Now suppose if you take two places on the earth surface, one area which has a presence of what is called hard rocks in its course, then the amount of time it will take will be higher as compared to the area if it is flowing on a softer type of rock. So that way we cannot quantify the amount of time which has been taken by the river. So this is basically because of what is called the structure, geological structure of the area. The next thing is that it also depends upon the amount of rainfall which has been received in that particular area. Because the amount of rainfall is very important, because the volume of the water depends on what? Depends on the rainfall which has been received in that particular area. And another thing is that the velocity of the river will be different from one area to another area. So that way the time is not been fixed. Right. And next one is what is called as the time factor. The time factor ultimately depends on the climate of that particular area, which determines the rainfall, and the second thing is the geological structure of area. So these two basic factors are taken into consideration when you are determining the amount of time which is being taken or in which particular stage the river is there.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am. Sir, my next question to Nagesh sir is that, sir, we have discussed various landforms which have been developed during the mature stage of cycle of erosion. So, in what stages of cycle of erosion monad nags will develop, sir? Could you explain, please?
Yeah. So, monad nags are the landform features that are usually found in the old stage, where we see that the as you can see in the diagram in the where this is due to the erosivity resistant of the rock, as madam has said, because we have the hard rock and soft rock, and when during this process of erosion the surrounding area of that rock will be eroded, and this the remaining one which is there, it stands as a protruding one, and these monad nags are also known as inselbergs in terms of geomorphological features. So usually these monad nags, again as madam has said, that regarding it depends upon the nature of erosion or the load carrying capacity of a river and the resistiveness of the rock that it is going through. So the monad nags usually found on the old stage, where we find that it is as a crop out from the other flatlands which are usually along the end stage of the fluvial cycle of erosion.
So thank you, sir. My next question is to ma'am that, so in the fluvial cycle of erosion, actually it starts from the base level and it ends from the base level. So my question is that, what do you mean by base level, and what is the significance of base level in fluvial cycle of erosion?
Okay. Now the concept of fluvial cycle of erosion starts with the uplifted landscape. And when it is going through the cyclic evolution, that is when it is passing from youthful stage to maturity to old stage, then the question comes is that the whole landscape is been what is called as leveled down, or it is been eroded, right? But there is some there is some limit up to which the river as an erosive agent can undertake the erosion. So the ultimate level up to which the river can undertake erosion is the sea level. So sea level is the ultimate level up to which the river can undertake erosion, that is vertical erosion, and that is called as the base level erosion. So sea level is taken into consideration as a base level for the cycle of erosion.
So what is the significance of the base level in cycle of erosion, ma'am?
Because the landscape which is being developed depends on the two important factors which are operating on the earth's surface. One is the upliftment, and second is the upliftment of a area due to the diastrophic process, and the second is the sea level, right? If sea level changes, then the river can undertake what? More of erosion. So instead of eroding up to this level, if there is a fall in the sea level, then the river can undertake more of erosion. This is one thing. And suppose if the river, if the landscape in a particular area, it is been getting uplifted, then again what happens? The river will get additional energy to do the vertical erosion. So if there is a change in the base level, then there are changes in the erosive capacity of the river.
Thank you, ma'am. So this entire process of fluvial cycle of erosion will bring the changes in the landscape. So in terms of relief, it will bring the changes in terms of landscape in terms of relief. So could you explain the variations in relief, ma'am?
Okay, so ultimately in the cyclic evolution of the landform, the relief changes. So when we are using the concept of relief, we can say that it is the change in the elevational landscape of the area, or it is related to the changes in the height of a particular area. So when we are talking about relief, here two important factors related to relief comes into the picture. One is the absolute relief and the second is the relative relief. Suppose if you take the youthful stage. Now before going to that, now let us come to these two terms, that is relative relief and absolute relief. Absolute relief is measured from the sea level. Absolute relief is measured in terms of sea level, and when we are talking about the concept of relative relief, the very word tells that it is relative. That is the basic difference between the valley portion and the top of the mountains, which we can call it as the relative relief. So there are changes when we are talking about the relief variations on the earth's surface. We are talking in terms of variation which are being brought about by the river in terms of both absolute relief as well as relative relief. So suppose if you take the youthful stage of the river, there is maximum of both absolute relief and the relative relief, right? And maximum relief develops at the end of the youthful stage or in the starting of the maturity stage. But by the time the river reaches the old stage, then the relief becomes very less, because most of the area is converted into a featureless plain, or it is more or less converted into a plain or a flat surface. So in other words, we can say that both the absolute relief as well as relative relief decreases, because most of the area is been reduced nearer to the sea level. That is the what is called differences in terms of relief during the progressive evolution of the fluvial cycle of erosion.
So thank you, ma'am. So ultimately, that landscape which has been developed during the cycle of erosion. So can you explain the few characteristics of the landscape which have been developed during these all stages?
Okay. Now I think already he has explained about few landforms which are evolved in different stages. Now let us come back to the typical features which are the characteristics of the youthful stage. So when you look into the landscape, these features are mostly seen in the mountainous areas, and these typical features are say for example gorges or canyons or V-shaped valleys. Another typical features are rapids and waterfalls. Then you have interlocking spurs. In fact, in detail we have not dealt into it. We have some features like plunge pools or potholes, etc. They are the features which are associated with the first stage of the river, that is the youthful stage of the river. When it comes to the maturity stage of the river, as we have seen earlier, that during the maturity stage of the river undertakes both the erosion as well as depositional. So there is what is called as those features are typical of what is called as the maturity stage of the river. And one such typical example, which is the characteristic of a maturity stage of the river, is the meandering of the river. Right, and if you take the meandering of the river, so there during the meandering of the river, we can say some type of erosion is taking place along the sides of the meanders. So that type, like the meander which will have two different type of slopes developed on one side and the other side. One side the slope is concave, and another side of the meander is what? Concave. This is because erosion and deposition, they are acting simultaneously, especially seen during the meandering of the river. Then you have oxbolecs, then you have floodplains, right? Now when you come to the last stage or the old stage of the river, the landscape mostly is converted into flat surface, which in fluvial cycle of erosion is called as a peneplain. And the remains or the hard resistant rock of the earlier interfluvial areas, or you can call it as the watershed, will stand isolated in this flat plain, right? And those isolated hills are called as monadnocks. So monadnocks and peneplains are the typical features which are associated with the last stage of the river, that is the old stage of the river.
So thank you, ma'am, for explaining characteristics of the landscape which have been formed during the different stages of the fluvial cycle of erosion. So now I request Professor B. Srinagesh sir to summarize the concept which we have discussed it so far, sir.
Yeah, thank you. As we have discussed since last 50 minutes regarding the fluvial cycle of erosion, we have learnt about the different stages of the fluvial cycle of erosion, and also at the same time the process, what we call the structure, process and time, which are the important factors in determining the fluvial cycle of erosion. The structure has been discussed, that what type of the nature of rock that the river is flowing, and it determines the nature of erosion. And when we come to the process, how much time it is taking, and the stages, what stages it is actually dealing with, like youthful stage, mature stage and old stage. So here the time that takes place in this process of cycle of erosion, it depends upon the volume of water that the river is carrying, or in other words what we call it as the carrying capacity of the river. So basically when we talk about the stages, the youthful stage, it is the first stage where the river starts its process in terms of running into a small streams, and during this process it cuts on the valleys and forms the gorges, canyons and all other features which we have seen, right, in the form of waterfalls, rapids, spurs, interlocking spurs, etc. And these, the action of these in the youthful stage is mainly the erosion activity. And when we come to the second stage, that is mature stage, we find that it is the river that enters into the plain region, and here the carrying capacity, or you can say the load of the sediment is increased, and during this process when the river enters into the plain, it starts meandering due to the deposition. So here the activity of erosion as well as the deposition is taking place in the mature stage. So during this process the landform features that are formed are basically the meandering, which is the first stage, and followed by the floodplains and the oxbow lakes, which are nothing but when the excess of deposition takes place, the meandering is cut off and the stream takes a new route. And after this, the third stage where the rivers enter into the last stage, or what we call as the delta region. So in this delta region, before entering into the, that is the what we call as the mouth, where it enters into the sea or the ocean, it forms the a kind of a distributaries in the form, and they form the deltas. So in the initial stage, when the streams start flowing, they are added in terms of with other small streams known as the tributaries, and when it enters into the mouth, they are distributed, and where we find the delta. So here the major aspect of a old stage is delta, and apart from that the peneplanation, what as madam has said, that there is a complete flat bed or the base level when it is attained, it is due to the, or it is in the old stage. So we have learned about the fluvial cycle of erosion and the stages of cycle of erosion, which was actually the concept which was proposed by W.M. Davies in the 19th century.
So thank you so much, sir. I think our students have benefited from this discussion because they have learned the different stages of the fluvial cycle of erosion and the different landforms which have been evolved during the different stages of landform and the characteristics of the landforms which have been evolved during the different stages of the landforms. And I am very thankful to both the eminent resource persons, Professor B. Vijaya Bhyole madam as well as Professor B. Srinagesh sir. So out of so thank you so much, sir. But I have a little doubt regarding one small doubt is with me, ma'am. So just I would like to ask one doubt, that how does sediment transport vary across different stages of this fluvial cycle of erosion? As we
Okay, the carrying capacity of the river or carrying capacity of the sediments by the river depends on, again, the same thing. One is channel gradient and the second one is the volume of water. So suppose if you take the first stage of the river, that is the youthful stage of the river. So during the youthful stage of the river, no doubt the volume of water is more, but because of the channel gradient is more, then the sediment carrying capacity is relatively less as compared to the maturity stage of the river. So during the when it comes down to the maturity stage of the river, then the channel gradient is not that what is called as steep. So the carrying capacity of the sediments of the river is more. So it successfully decreases in the old stage. So because of that, we can see during the maturity stage and the old stage, deposition will take place more because the volume of water is less and the channel gradient is less. So sediment carrying capacity will be more during the maturity stage of the river. And as I said just now, that it successfully gets decreased in the old stage of the river.
So thank you so much, ma'am, because this was my personal doubt which I have asked, because from since when I was a PG student, then that also I got the doubt. That is the reason I asked, because I got opportunity to discuss with you. And I would like to say once again I would like to say thanks to both the eminent resource persons who have in spite of their busy schedule, they have come to here and they have discussed a lot and they have given much of the subject. Because when I am listening to them, when I am clarifying my doubts, I come to know that when I was in the PG, after PG there was a long gap between PG and now. So I have refreshed by by listening to your topics, because I was little bit doubt about in which part youthful stage was seen and which part of India the maturity stage of the fluvial cycle of erosion is seen. So in that part I was very clear about that now. And apart from me, my students also I think they have also benefited from this teleconference. I would like to say from bottom of the heart, I would like to say thank you for both the resource person. Thank you one and all.
So just before concluding, one basic question, I think it should come from the student point of view. Now the topic is related to the fluvial cycle of erosion. Right. When you look into the syllabus of this undergraduate student, now the question comes is that is the concept of cycle of erosion is related to the work of river only, because that is what. So the concept of cycle of erosion is applicable all over the world, but the process which has been operating is different. Say for example, the area where the role of river is there, we are calling it as the fluvial process, where in the high mountainous areas it's a glacial process. In the near the sea coast it is the shoreline process. In the karst landforms where limestone is important, role of underground water is important. So that way the concept of cycle of erosion is operative in different landscape all over the world. So that way the landform development which subsequently develops on the earth surface depends on what type of geomorphic agent is operating in that particular area.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much for we had a elaborative discussion on fluvial cycle of erosion. Thank you so much.